I grew up in a small town in south of Russia where I worked as an assistant professor at a local university. And I had big dreams that maybe one day I will collaborate with a foreign scholar and maybe I will become an international star. And maybe I'll perform my story at this show. So one day in 2003, I ran into a old colleague of mine, Yuri, who was with somebody else, and he introduced us to each other. Yuri said, this is Will. He's a professor of sociology at Northwestern University in Chicago. Will and I co-authored an article together. And I asked Will, how long are you in town for? And Will said, just for a day. Actually, my visa registration didn't allow me to travel outside of Moscow, and I didn't supposed to be here. So I'm trying not to attract much attention, he said. And I thought, I wonder if all Americans are as absent-minded as this one, because apparently it didn't seem that he knew what not attracting attention meant. So Will was wearing sports shoes, blue jeans, and a red t-shirt, while everybody else on the campus was wearing suit and ties. Also, Will was carrying a backpack, while no one over 12 years old carried backpack in our part of the world. You actually could spot Will if you look down from out of space at that part of the planet. So my colleague Yuri said, Will is staying at my place tonight. Why don't you join us for a dinner? So we jumped in my old Russian car, Zhiguli, and drove to Yuri's place. Yuri's wife wasn't at home, so his daughter, Marina, served us a dinner in the living room and then closed the door behind her. Will said, aren't you gonna join us? And I said, Yuri said, sorry, according to our local weird traditions, a woman alone wouldn't sit with three men. And I said, also a daughter wouldn't sit at the same table with her father. So, and then we kind of decided to switch from boring topic of young women to more exciting topic of academic research. So while we were discussing it, a little later, Marina slightly opened the door and said, Dad, can I talk to you for a moment? And Yuri left the room. So Will kept talking to me, but I couldn't hear a word of what he was saying. Apparently, as a foreigner, he didn't understand what just happened, because never before in our part of the world, ever a daughter interrupted her father while he was discussing paternalistic theory with his guests, as we were doing. So when Yuri came back, I asked him what happened. And he said, nothing, it's just a police officer knocked at the wrong door. It's not that I didn't believe Yuri, but it didn't make sense to me that Marina couldn't handle a police officer who knocked at their own door. So I said, I actually need to check my car, and I went out. So it was already dark outside, and when approaching the parking lot behind the building, I noticed a man with a flashlight looking inside my car. He was wearing a nice suit, and I figured that he was not a criminal trying to steal my car. So I stopped at a distance. I said, that's my car. So he looked at me, and it didn't seem that he was scary or angry that I caught him. He actually looked happy to see me. And I instantly knew who he was. He was a KGB officer. He said, come with me. So he brought me to the playground behind the building, and I found myself surrounded by 5 men in plain clothes, like that guy, apparently 5 KGB agents, then a man in a police uniform, and 3 men in military uniform. So the KGB agent who brought me there ran toward one of the military men and whispered into his ear. And by their weird subordination, I guessed who these military men were. They were GRU agents, which is Russian military intelligence. So GRU is the most secretive and the most horrible agency in Russia. It originated during Stalin's time. It used to be called SMERSH, which is abbreviation for Death to Foreign Intelligence. I never before saw a GRU in flesh. I only heard that they tortured their suspects by electrocution. So these 3 GRU agents were like wolves. And the 5 KGB agents were like jackals. And the police officer was like a dog. I'm not sure who I was. But I moved closer to the police officer. And I thought, I will not survive electric torture. I'm even afraid of tickling. So then the GRU, whom the KGB whispered in the ear, turned toward me and called me by my name. He said, "Are you Sufian Zhemukhov?" I guessed that they tracked my name by my car plate number, and that scared me even more. And I only could nod my head. Then the GRU said, "Are you with the man with backpack?" I nodded again. Then the GRU said, "Are you in the apartment 246? I thought, they know everything, which means they're not going to torture me for information. So I felt a little relieved and managed to breathe out my first word, "Da." Then the GRU turned toward the police officer and said, "And you told us that he wasn't there." And now it was the police officer's turn to forget all the words. And then the GRU said, "Go and check his registration." And the police officer left. And I found myself standing like a lonely lamb among wolves and jackals. I closed my eyes for a moment and thought, why is this happening to me? I only wanted to write an article. Then I opened my eyes and hopefully said, "Can I go also?" And the GRU said, "Yes, we'll find you if we need you." And on that happy note, I followed the police officer. So back in Yuri's apartment, the officer checked Will's registration, and Yuri took me into other room, and Will joined us, and Yuri said, "I got rid of that police officer, and you brought him back." I said, "You got rid of that police officer, but you didn't get rid of 3 GRU and 5 KGB agents." And I briefly told them what happened to me outside. Then we all came back to the officer, and Will said, "Officer, could you explain, please, why am I under Russian intelligence's surveillance?" And the officer kind of dismissed him. He said, "Every foreigner is in Russia." Then Yuri said, "So what's GRU gonna do to Will?" And the officer said, "Nothing. They wouldn't touch an American and risk an international scandal." And when the officer was leaving, I said, "What about me?" And the officer said, "What about you?" I said, "Well, I've seen their faces." And the officer said, "Please, you nobody to be of interest to GRU." Well, I felt relieved, and for the first time in my life, I thought, it's nice to be a nobody sometime.